Hey everyone. As you're probably aware by now, this week the Node Package Manager, otherwise known as NPM, had basically some pretty big packages that got hacked and got some malicious code injected in them. Now, this was classified, obviously as more of like a supply chain attack, right? Supply chain attacks, from to me, are always, pretty interesting. I know they're pretty simple to understand, but for me, it's kind of cool how people can, find their way into things and have it literally affect like the supply chain, right? But basically, what happened? There's a developer, Josh Junan, or sorry, I should say, or otherwise known as Quix. Basically, he was the package maintainer for a couple of pretty big main packages, and he actually basically what happened is had an email come up that was obviously a phishing email, but it looks like a pretty good one, right? Sometimes they're very obvious, but you can sometimes kind of tell, right, if they're missing things. But it was basically asking him to reset his multi-factor authentication, and basically he was followed a link, to do that, and he had to put his username and password in. Little did he know that basically that username and password field was a fake page, and then he basically gave up his credentials, and then threat actors were able to take control and inject the malicious code into the packages. But basically, within these packages, right? This is the main list here. There's quite a bit, of packages that were impacted, and basically what was injected in them was, basically I guess you could say like cryptocurrency mining software in order to try to have that be injected into the end user's browser or whatnot to make money for the threat actor that did this attack. Now it's pretty like interesting when this happens because you might realize that within if you ever worked in like a workplace, right, and they have like servers and stuff, they'll probably have things set up to have auto update, which is not uncommon, right? I think NPM, I just started using it recently actually in my home lab to do some coding and stuff. And I think you can just do like an NPM update and it'll kind of update those packages for you. Similar to if you did like a sudo apt update or sudo pacman hyphen syu if you use Arch or whatever, right? If you do like a package update, right, and you're kind of just, going through the rhythm and, if you're not one of those people that really looks in the detail, which I probably should, but sometimes, I'm more than guilty of doing sudo apt update and upgrading, right? The code that basically what can happen is if you have a lot of background jobs like I was getting at in automation, a lot of corporate environments could have had these malicious packages downloaded to different environments, without even thinking about it, right? Because you think that the secure and reputable package manager NPM, right? Not I say that loosely, but NPM. You think it's coming from NPM, it should be fine, right? So this basically what happens is probably a ton of people, as you can see here. There's millions of downloads every week, so there's a pretty good chance that someone got some of this. I guess you could say malicious and bad code, the cryptocurrency mining, onto their systems without knowing it. And at the end of the day, it's you can't really blame the end user, right? If they're expecting something to be secure and come from a secure repository, that's fine. It's not like they're going to the internet and going on like SourceForge and finding something kind of shady, right? They were going to via NPM and make it right and do it more of in a controlled way. But that was a pretty big supply chain attack. It made a lot of noise. I didn't where I work. I didn't hear anything about it, but maybe there might be something coming. I don't know. It's probably all under very very tight knit group at the moment. But this was a big attack and everything, and it caused a lot of noise. But the best part was the result of the attack, and that was funny in my opinion. So. A couple days later, I read this headline, and it kind of came out everywhere when I was reading. But the hackers who did the hack, somehow the numbers turned up, and basically, after all the cryptocurrency mining, before they were able to revert, a lot of the code, and people started, uninstalling that package version or reverting back, right? It turns out they really didn't make that much from basically doing this attack. It was kind of laughable. I think it says somewhere down here, basically, right? The attackers, yeah, they made less than $1,000. That's pretty funny in my opinion because if you're targeting, that many downloads, millions of per week. I know mining cryptocurrency takes time, but you'd think basically they make a little, I guess not like a botnet, but sort of like a little net, where they have mining going on over those millions of users. You think you'd make a little bit more, but it turns out, they only really got $20.05 worth of Ethereum. So didn't really do much there, but that was a really interesting part to me. But kind of want to close here and say, really, when attack like this happens, I know it is tough sometimes with like phishing and whatnot, but really, the ultimately my best advice is just to stay vigilant. And if companies are asking you, to reset something when you're not really sure about it, simply just don't do it, or contact their support and make sure you're doing it the proper way. Talk to a human if possible. I know I shouldn't even say that, but if something doesn't seem right, it's probably not right. It's always good if, hey, if you get an email saying to reset something, just leave it. They can't force you to do something, right? So just always be vigilant. Basically you're the first line of defense. And it all starts with the basics, right? I was talking to someone a couple weeks ago, more of a security professional, and they said, they don't see a lot of novel things, but the basics are what keep occurring again and again. So you can have a lesson learned from this NPM supply chain attack that is that the basics can get you. But I'm glad in the end, not a lot of money was made, and no, it didn't seem like there was like anything astronomical. But hey, maybe there's stuff going on in the background we're not worried about yet. But yeah, if you enjoyed this, everyone, please sure to like, comment, and or subscribe, and I'll see you later. Peace.